Hello, everyone, and welcome to Final Cut, where you don't have to be a horror fan, but it sure helps. Today, we are covering directed by Kane Parsons, or more popularly known by his YouTube name, Kane Pixels. Backrooms is the newest film in A24's extensive catalog and its highest grossing film to date. Backrooms follows Clark, a struggling furniture store owner and a failed architect struggling to come to terms with his collapse of his marriage. When he discovers an endless labyrinth of eerie yellow rooms hidden beneath reality, he becomes obsessed with uncovering its secrets, only to learn that something else may already be lurking inside. Before we get into the movie itself, let's talk about the cast. It ranges from pretty well-known established actors to relatively unknown and up-and-coming actors and actresses. Leading the film is Chiwetel Ejiofor as Clark. You may recognize him from 12 Years a Slave, Doctor Strange, and The Martian. Playing Mary is Renate Rinsve, best known for her acclaimed performance in The Worst Person in the World, a TV show. Kat is played by Lakita Maxwell, who many viewers will know from Apple TV's series Shrinking. Bobby is played by Finn Bennett, and this is a personal favorite of mine because I love HBO and I love Game of Thrones. And Finn Bennett recently appeared in Knights of the Seven Kingdom, and he plays a Targaryen. And finally, my favorite cast member, Mark Duplass, who horror fans should instantly recognize from Creep, Creep 2, and the new show on Shudder, Creep Tapes. Phenomenal actor. Always a treat to see him in any movie. All right, so the Backrooms opens and there's a async logo flash on the screen, and we go into some recovered VHS recording of I'm assuming an async employee, and he is inside the back rooms and he's lost. And he starts making his way around the back rooms and he starts to hear footsteps coming towards him. And he is trying to find his way back to where he came from. And he finds this run of cords and he makes his way back. And it seems to be some sort of command center for when they enter the back rooms. I'm not entirely sure. And he blocks off the entrance that he came in. And while he's doing that, a bird flies in and falls, and he thinks it's dead. It hits a wall, and then he goes over to it, and it pops up, and it flies off, and he goes to look where it came from, right? And he's going down the hallway, and there's just all sorts of like furniture embedded in the wall, half in, half out. There's a banner that says "No credit needed," which we will find out later on in the movie that is a banner from Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, the main setting of this movie. And so he's going down the hallway and he keeps hearing those footsteps behind him. And then he hears a door creak and he turns around, and this shadow figure, you can't really discern any features from it, comes out of the doorway and starts to make its way down to him. And he starts to run. He takes off and he's going through this maze of corridors. He's running as fast as he can. And he finally gets around a corner and there's nowhere to go. And so he turns around and he tries to book it and he runs into whatever it was. At this point, I'm assuming that it is Captain Clark. After the cold open, they cut to a scene of a little girl putting her hands in some wet cement, kind of like you would if you were putting a new driveway in or something like that, kind of like a memory of what happened. And we come to find out that little girl in the flashback is Mary, who is Clark's therapist. And we're kind of led to believe that Clark is the main antagonist of this movie. And I think that is kind of a subtle foreshadowing that maybe he isn't, because he's not the first character we meet. Technically, it's Mary. Well, I should say first character that's alive still. I'm going to assume that the async employee died in that opening sequence. Once we cut from the concrete, we meet Clark, and he is having a therapy session with Mary, and they start to reenact the argument that led to Clark's wife leaving him, and it becomes pretty aggressive, and Clark kind of like loses it, and he really gets into his character, and he reveals a lot of his flaws. I mean, he's a narcissist. He blames everybody for everything. Nothing can be his fault. He shifts the blame, and I mean, we all know people like that. There's always somebody that it's never their fault. And he is one of those. He blames his wife for his failed architect career. And due to that, he now owns and runs a discount furniture store, Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. And yeah, he believes everyone else is responsible for his failures. There is a little part of me that does kind of feel for Clark. I know it's got to be tough to have your dreams kind of slip away from you, regardless of whose fault it is, even if it's his, which I'm sure it is. He doesn't exactly have the brightest personality in the world, but yeah, you just kind of feel bad for him, and he's kind of in this rut in his life, and nothing really seems to be going his way. And I think that really plays into why he spends so much time in the back rooms and why he's so excited when he finds it, because it's a place that he can be himself and he doesn't have to worry about others interfering or taking control of his life. He can just exist. Cut to Clark's office, and an electrician comes in, and he's talking to Clark, and they're reviewing the electric bill. And Clark is concerned as to why the electric bill is so high. He says that they have mysterious blackouts throughout the building. Sometimes it's the upper floor, sometimes it's the lower floor. He said that he even manually turns off the switches at night. So they go downstairs and they investigate the breaker box, and they notice, if you have seen a breaker panel, you know how they go down into two columns, maybe more, depending on how big your breaker box is. And once you get to the bottom, in like the label for the panel box, there are two switches that are kind of at like a 45-degree angle, just placed inside that label. And they shouldn't be there. There's no way that they could be there. I'm not quite sure if this is something that's part of like Backrooms lore or not. It kind of, to me, feels like it's like almost like the Backrooms is bleeding into our reality. But it's definitely the first major indicator that something's a little off about this place. And obviously, since Clark is kind of going through something in his life right now and he's separated from his wife, he doesn't really have a place to stay. So he stays overnight in the store, which is actually kind of a funny scene because you just kind of see him laying on the bed, and then it slowly pans out, and then you slowly start to realize he's not in his house. He's in the store. This is like really sad. But the TV briefly, he's watching the TV, and there's an ad for like another discount furniture store, but like a Texas version, cowboy, real howdy doody, and just a duty. And then the TV briefly displays footage of a strange room, and you can kind of see something in a doorway. It's yellow wallpaper room, yellow floor, carpet, and we know it's the back rooms, but obviously Clark has no idea. And then the basement lights the basement lights start to flicker, and the power begins to act strangely. All the lights turn on upstairs, and then they slowly go out. And so he heads down to the basement to figure out what's going on. All the lights are on in the basement. He goes to the breaker box. He turns them all off, and they're still on. Well, then he turns off the two switches that shouldn't be there, the ones at the 45, and the power finally goes out. So he just kind of brushes it off, and he's willing to go to bed. And he starts to walk by, and then he notices a light out of the corner of his eye, like a slit of light through the wall. And then he kind of, goes back and forth trying to find out where he exactly saw it from. And then he makes full contact with it, and he walks towards it. He puts his hand on it, and then he passes his hand through, and he has now entered the back rooms. You get in the back rooms, and I mean, it's exactly like you would picture the back rooms. Everything that you've seen online, it's the set design for this movie is amazing. It's to my knowledge, most of it is practical. Obviously, there are some shots that like the endless chasm. Obviously, that's not something you can really build. The back rooms that we see when he gets in there in this first scene, all practically built. Very, very cool. I actually heard an interview where Kane Parsons, the director of the film, would walk around after everybody had left with the lights off and a flashlight, and would walk around the sets of the back rooms like a psychopath. But I mean, this is his baby, so I mean, why not? So Clark is journeying deeper into the back rooms, and he ends up coming across a duffel bag that was seen in the opening sequence, and it belongs to a Noreen, I believe is his name. So that is the guy who was wearing the hazmat suit that we saw die in the beginning. He starts to hear these footsteps, and he crawls. So then he finds this hole. He crawls through it, and he keeps hearing these footsteps getting louder and louder. And he looks back and he yells. down for somebody. And I probably should have mentioned there's a cardboard cutout playing some audio on it. I'm assuming to try and lure whatever this entity is. And the entity comes in the room and smashes it to pieces. And Clark sees this through the long tunnel. So he obviously freaks out. And he turns around. He goes up this pretty steep looking wall to this very tiny door, oompa loompa sized door. And he finally manages to get out, and he's kind of booking it for the exit because he keeps hearing the footsteps. Then he finally gets to the room full of furniture that he came in, and he runs to the wall and he can't find the door right away, and he starts freaking out. And as you would, and keeps hearing the footsteps get louder and louder and louder, and he eventually finds his way through, and he for some reason comes back in to take another look. Kind of odd, but I think that he didn't really want to leave, and you'll kind of get that feeling throughout the movie. We cut to Clark's next therapy session, and he walks in and he looks like a mess. He really kind of looks like he's like tweaking out. I mean, understandably after what you found, but not entirely sure how much time has passed here. Since I'm assuming it's the next day, but he goes off on this rant to Mary, his therapist, and he's trying to describe the back rooms, how it's a place within a place, and it goes on forever and it never ends. And I mean, he sounds like a lunatic. She basically tells him that he's crazy. And then we do get one of my favorite lines from the movie. Clark is trying to describe the back rooms to her, and he says that it's like describing a dog to someone who's never seen one, and then asking them to draw it from memory. And I mean, that I feel like that's a perfect representation of what the Backrooms is. It's just a collage of rooms. In my opinion, it feels like there's a million people remembering the same room, and every person remembers it differently. And that's where it starts to get altered and kind of filtered throughout everybody's memory till it comes down to just the base details that everybody remembers about the room, the structure. And to really seal the idea of his insanity to Mary, he pulls out this drawing that he's made of the back rooms, clearly showing that he has spent a significantly more time in the back rooms than we have seen. And it's this sketch on a piece of paper. And I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And I mean, it can't, because it's the back rooms. Nothing makes sense. And yeah, Mary kind of dismisses him, and she kind of thinks that he's like really losing it. And so Clark gets upset, and he leaves, and he goes to Kat, his assistant manager, I believe is her name, and her boyfriend, who helped film commercials for Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. And he asks if he still has a camera, and he asks for their help, and they head back to the store, and they start recording on the VHS, which I think is a awesome touch. I love the segments of VHS that they have in this movie. It makes it feel more real, more grounded. So Clark convinces them to tag along, and at first they're pretty reluctant, and they think that he's kind of going crazy when he's asked them to go through this wall, just walk through the wall like they're fucking Harry Potter at platform 9 3/4. And he shows them where the backrooms is. He has the entrance to the backrooms outlined in painter's tape to help find their way in, and he convinces them to go into the back room. They come in, and they're going around the back rooms, and they're just kind of, I mean, like, this is amazing. The shots in this sequence are so cool. To see the back rooms fully formed into a physical thing that you can see and touch. It's incredible how far this short little story on Reddit has come to now being a full-fledged movie, a feature-length film, and A24's highest grossing film to date. It's awesome. They're exploring the back rooms, and then we reach this room with a bed on it, or in it, I should say. And there's this long chute that goes down. It's a very steep decline. I'd probably say about, Clark has the idea to tie off one end of the rope to the bed and tie off the other end to Bobby. So they lower him down, and then he ends up slipping a little bit, and he falls down the rest of the way. And he gets up, and he's in this like really dark, kind of dingy, grungy kind of room, and there's piles of clothes everywhere. just mounds and mounds of clothes. And honestly, one of the creepier sequences of the movie, and it freaked me the fuck out when I watched it the first time in theaters. He kind of pans over a laundry pile, and there's a face in the laundry pile just staring at the camera. And took me a second to realize, but it's one of the cardboard cutouts that we saw earlier in the film that was making that was transmitting all the noises. And he's doing a general sweep of the laundry room, and he comments about how disgusting it is and how bad it smells. And once he gets past this laundry pile, there's a room with a light flickering, and he kind of inches his way closer to take a look, and he sees someone, an entity, if you will. And so obviously freaks out. He turns around, he starts running. He's running up the hill, and he's freaking out, and they're trying to pull him up, and it's taking a little longer than he wants. And he finally gets to the top, and they think that they're safe and whatnot. And then he starts to freak out, and I think at this point I kind of had a realization that I think Clark may have been using them as bait. He did a unreasonably tight knot on Bobby's pants to keep him, and it's very hard, and they struggle to get it off, and that dooms Bobby. Bobby gets yanked back down to the bottom of this slide, and then whatever's pulling on the cord pulls hard enough, and it yanks the bed across the room, and it pushes Kat and Clark down the chute. And once we reach the bottom, the camera lands just perfect enough for us to see Bobby being dragged through a doorway. Kat is rushing to try and help him, and she kind of runs off. And so Clark's alone, and you hear her screaming. So then he, as kind of the coward he is, he takes off through a hole in the roof wall, I'll call it. It's kind of a drop ceiling on its side, and he's making his way through this corridor and trying to make sure that he's not being followed. And he we get into one of my favorite segments of the movie, where we get to really see the back rooms and a lot more of the rooms outside of just the dingy yellow carpeted rooms. And he's going through all these different rooms as he's being chased, and he hears all these stomps, and I'm honestly kind of getting goosebumps just thinking about it. It's a really cool and pretty intense scene. It's honestly very disturbing and pretty intense, unsettling, like how fast he moves through the back rooms at this point while he's running, and with the camera, because I mean we're held hostage in his POV. So like wherever Clark looks, we look. We have no choice. And he stumbles across this room, the fucking Christmas tree room, and he walks in, and there's this the whole room's black besides this Christmas tree in the middle, and he sees like these like I think they're mannequins. They're like half embedded in the floor, half not. Um, and he wraps his way around the tree, and there's somebody sitting in a wheelchair, some deformed backrooms monster creature, um, and he like pulls on a light switch and turns on the light that's attached to his wheelchair. And it's really creepy because at first you don't really think that there's anything in there and that there's anything that's real. And then you hear this, he turns this light on, and then you hear this fucking moaning of this woman, and she starts to like stumble towards Clark. And it is so fucking creepy. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And she can't really walk right, and her face is all fucked up, and he starts freaking out, and he's running, and then you just hear like howling and screaming as he's running, and he's trying to escape, and he eventually makes his way into some sort of bathroom type setting. um and he hears Kat, and he hears her screaming, and he enters a room, and he can't see her, but she can see him. And it doesn't quite make sense because obviously you would think like a one-way mirror, a two-way mirror, and it would be glass, but it's just tile. That's all we see is tile. So I'm assuming that she just has a window on the other side. And then he sets the camera down, and he's banging on the walls trying to figure out, and then something picks up the camera and is lurching towards Clark. And it cuts away before we really see if anything happens to Clark in this scene. We cut back to Mary, and she is receiving a phone call, and she decides not to answer it. And it's a voicemail from Clark. And Clark says, "I opened the window." that won't be coming back. Pretty ominous. So Mary is obviously concerned for Clark, and I feel like she has like some sort of like underlying need to prove that she's a good therapist, and so I think that's why she like kind of reaches out to try and find Clark. And I mean, she seems like a pretty good human being in general. She obviously had a pretty rough upbringing, as if you watch the when you watch the movie, you will know. She goes to the furniture store and notices that there's tons of envelopes stuffed under the door, mail, and she walks in and the door's unlocked. And I think that it's kind of funny that this furniture store has been unlocked for who knows how long, and nobody's come in. Um, Nobody's coming to buy anything, and I feel like that really shows how much of a failure this furniture store is, and it kind of makes Clark seem a little more pathetic. And it kind of made me have a little more empathy for him. I'm also probably thinking about it way too much, but Mary goes downstairs and she finds the entrance that he's talking about, and she sees a fly go in through the wall, and so she finally reaches out and she stumbles in through the and Mary's now in the back room, and I like this because this is a more realistic, grounded protagonist because we are now in Mary's perspective and she's kind of been thrust into the back rooms. I wouldn't say unwillingly because she obviously could have just turned around and left. I mean, she didn't have to go. So she's stumbling through the back rooms and she's trying to find her way. And she actually she starts hearing these footsteps and she kind of backs herself into a corner. And then she hears Clark and her and Clark connect and they hear these footsteps coming towards Clark's lost it, guys. He attacks Mary, chokes her out, and we cut to and Mary wakes up and she's tied up in a dining room, you could say. Obviously it's a warped version of a dining room. And there's a being from the back rooms at the dinner table with her and Clark, and Mary begs Clark to let her help him. Actually, there are three beings in the room with them, and one is the wheelchair guy from the Christmas tree. There's another larger man sitting at the table. He's got like six eyes. And then the lady that actually stumbled after him in that very creepy scene. And it seems like what Clark reveals in this scene is that everybody is in the back rooms. There's a version of everybody in the back rooms, but they're all remembered differently. Every memory kind of gets warped into one singular person, and that's where the faces and everything start to get kind of distorted. So Clark has officially jumped ship at this point, and he is talking to Mary, and he tells her that they can't feel pain. So I think it's a screwdriver, just shoves it into the guy's neck. No blood, nothing. No blood, no grunt, no twitch, no sign of pain. It's really gross. And then he says the best part: "You can eat them," and he's like fucking over the moon that you can eat them. And he like starts digging into this guy's stomach and he pulls it out, and it's like this white kind of gel looking substance, and he puts it on Mary's plate for her to eat. Gives her a pretty big portion, I'd say. And he tells her to try it. He then turns and opens the fridge, revealing Cat, his assistant manager's dismembered head in the fridge. We don't ever really find out like how that happened, but we can only assume. And he grabs a drink out of the fridge, sits back down at the table, and Mary's pleading with him to let her go and that she can help him. And he basically tells her that he's not going to let her go. And even if he did, she would have no way to get out. So she kind of starts to realize that she's going to have to lie to get her way out of here. She tells Clark that she'll do anything that he wants. She's begging, she's pleading with him. So he asks to reenact the scene once again of him and his marriage. And then as they're reenacting the scene, he says that he doesn't feel into it because she doesn't look quite right. So he turns around and cuts the girl with the red hair. He cuts her scalp off and puts it on Mary's head so he can really picture that it's his ex-wife. They get into the scene and it starts. Clark is getting very intense, and then Mary fucking snaps on him, and she tells him that he's a narcissist and that he blames everybody for his own struggles and that maybe he's just wired that way. And he asks her how to stop, and she's just so fed up, and she basically tells him that she can't do anything to fix him, and it's just how he is. And she says this line that's, I mean, it's kind of sad. She says that she can't save anyone, and I think that kind of is like a relief for her, like a moment of clarity that she realizes that it can only do so much. I can't put all this weight on me to save everybody, because I feel like she thinks that that's her job as a therapist. And Clark admits to her that he likes it in here. He says that he feels like he's at home, like he's where he's supposed to be. She tells him to stay, and I think that honestly, if not for what would have happened next, I think Clark would have. He would have lived out the rest of his life inside the back rooms, just exploring it every day. So Clark decides to he's gonna let Mary go, and he cuts off one of her bindings to the chair, and then they hear something. And this is another really creepy scene with the red-headed multi-face lady, and it's kind of funny, but she hears something running, and she just fucking books it into the corner of this wall, and she's screaming and jumping and trying to run into the corner of this wall, kind of like when you're like lagging in a video game and you can't stop moving. She's just like sprinting full force into this wall trying to get away, and we hear this footsteps, and they start building, and they're growing louder, and Mary sees him. She sees something in the shadows of the doorway, and she's freaking out, and then it's finally revealed, and in walks a giant distorted version of Captain Clark from the Captain Clark Ottoman Empire commercials. This is done practically with a suit and a very giant man. I wish that I could pronounce his name, but he's done some other work. He was in Alien Romulus. He played the humanoid alien at the end of that movie. Very, very disturbing. And Captain Clark walks in, and Clark's like, "What are you doing here?" And he basically says that he introduces Mary. He says that she's leaving, that she is their therapist together, like as if they're the same person. And Clark's kind of pleading to the to Captain Clark that they don't need to change. And Captain Clark reaches down, picks up regular Clark, and uh, bites him, kills him off screen. Kind of upsetting that we don't really get to see Clark die. All the beings in the room are freaking out, and Mary is frantically trying to escape, and she's pressed up against the wall, and she's trying to like kind of just nonchalantly get out of there. And Mary makes a break for it, and she walks out into this like onto a street, and there's just the fronts of these houses, and they're surrounded by the yellow walls of the back rooms. And she makes her way down to the end of the street, and there's a locked door at the end. Once she tries the door, she turns around, and Captain Clark is dragging Clark's dead body through the street towards her, and she makes a break for one of the houses, and she gets inside, and she's obviously very disoriented. She has no idea what the fuck is going on. She doesn't know where she is, and she just runs for whatever open source room she can find. She runs through a room of chandeliers, and then a room of couches, and then eventually makes her way to this kind of like bottomless chasm. It almost kind of looks like the inside of a like an Embassy Suites hotel. I don't know if you may know what that looks like, but it has no end. And there's just this tiny little staircase off to the left, and she kind of shimmies her way over there, and there's a tiny door at the top of this in the ceiling, and she manages to get there, and she crawls through this hole in the floor. And once she gets up top, it's eerily familiar, but it's not quite the same. And it's the basement of the Ottoman Empire furniture store. And she walks upstairs, and she's in the main lobby of the store, and she gets to the front doors, and it's the back room's walls, and she's trapped in there. And so she turns around, and Captain Clark is lurching towards her. And I mean, I cannot give enough credit to this actor who plays Captain Clark. He's very imposing and very, for as kind of goofy as Captain Clark looks, because obviously he's a disfigured version of Clark. I mean, he's pretty scary. I mean, if I was being, it's the slow walk I think that does it for me. If he was running it, it'd probably still be scary, but the slow lurching walk towards Mary really kind of does it. And she actually takes a swing at his peg leg and knocks it out from under him. And then she runs over another one of those cardboard cutouts that we saw earlier in the film, and there's a loud beeping goes off, and then all this smoke fills the room, and I'm assuming it's something to knock Captain Clark out. So it's some sort of trap that Mary has accidentally sprung for Captain Clark, and Mary finds this narrow opening at the corner of the store, and she's getting blasted by this gas, and she kind of collapses on the floor. And you think that she's gonna pass out, and she eventually comes to, and Clark is Captain Clark is on top of her, and he's trying to kill her, and she turns around and she beats the shit out of him with this piece of concrete that she has on her that she grabbed from earlier in the movie. And she makes her way into the opening, and she realizes that Captain Clark can't quite get in there, and so she goes through to the other side just to come out to a group of hazmat suit async employees. And I mean, I think this is a really cool way to kind of in the movie, especially for people who like play the games and whatnot. She gets taken out of the I don't want to say out of the back rooms because I don't really know. I never really see her leave, and I'm assuming she's out of the back rooms, and so they take her in for a bunch of testing, and we see Captain Clark is on a medical table, and I'm assuming that they are investigating or examining him. And Mary is led down the hallway into this room, and my favorite, Mark Duplass, shows up. Obviously, he's an async employee, so he's interviewing Mary, and he's trying to kind of coerce her into spilling the beans about what she saw in the back room, and she wants to know what's going to happen to her, and he's not very reassuring as to what's going to happen to Mary, and the movie ends there, and it starts to flash through rooms that we've seen throughout the movie in the back rooms, remembered differently and remembered wrong, and we see a telephone pole with a missing sign of Cat and Bobby, and it's kind of like duplicated out throughout the room on a telephone pole as it's falling down. We see their apartment complex, which is basically every almost every scene that we've seen in the movie in the back rooms. And it's a very cool shot. And then it ends with a very poorly copied interrogation room and a remembered version of Mary sitting in a chair, and then the movie cuts to credits. And yeah, that was the Backrooms. My first impressions of it, I thought it was a really good movie. Obviously, it's a very confusing movie for it being the Backrooms. If it wasn't a confusing movie, I would be concerned. You know, usually you don't want your movies to have too many open-ended things, but it feels right for the movie that this is. I think Kane Parsons did a phenomenal job, especially for his age, and this being his first feature length film. I mean, he knocked it out of the park. I don't know if you can ask for a better debut from a first time director, especially at what 19, 20, something all around that. But yeah, I mean, it felt like how I personally would have imagined the Backrooms. Like it felt very disorienting, at times like hopeless. Like there's no end in sight. There's no way to get out. I think tied together well. I think the themes in the movie were really good. The themes of dealing with loneliness and not feeling like you are doing enough, and kind of feeling like the whole world is against you, even though if you take a look in the mirror, you kind of realize that it's you that's holding you back, and that you're not pushing for your dreams. And it's just easier to blame it on somebody else than to take the blame for it. And Clark really embodied that throughout the movie. Yeah, I mean, this was a good movie. I mean, obviously there were some parts that dragged. I mean, no movie's without its flaws. I mean, it took us, I think, almost 40 minutes maybe to get into the Backrooms. I could be wrong. Maybe it was 35. It still took a while, and I mean that's fine. I mean, we did have the cold open with the Backrooms, which I thought was really cool because obviously, again, it was shot on VHS, and that makes it feel a little more personal, a little more grounded in the world of the Backrooms. I thought the visuals were amazing. The cinematography, the layout of the rooms. I mean, I feel like you couldn't have gotten anybody else to direct this movie better than Kane Parsons with his knowledge of the Backrooms. I do like that Clark kind of became a villain in the end. I mean, a pretty tragic villain, but yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that this. I'm assuming that it's going to get a sequel, and I'm really looking forward to watching that. I hope Kane is back to direct the sequel. I feel like if he's not, then it probably won't be nearly as good. But yeah, I mean, yeah, those were my thoughts on the back rooms, and I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed talking about it. I'll see you in the next one.